thank you very much to the I Wish team for inviting me here today, and thank you to every one of you sitting in front of me. And my gosh, there are a lot of you. When I came in this morning, it was empty, and I didn't think that they would manage to fill up every single seat, but they have. So thank you all for coming. I've got to say, you're in for a treat today. Not only do you get to hear about career choices. This is definitely something when I was your age, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. Everybody gave me advice as to what I should do, but I really, really didn't know. The nice thing is that actually doesn't matter, because I've been working for 20 years, and I love the comment earlier that we're still young enough to change our careers. Thank you for that. But I've got another 25 years of my career to go. It's quite a long way. So doing something that you love, doing something that makes life fun every day, that really, really matters. And making the choices now really matter to actually influence what you're going to be doing every day in your career. But the showcase here today is fantastic, and I think you're incredibly lucky. And the comment about I wish, I wish that somebody had have done this for me when I was your age. I wish that somebody had have given me the opportunities to ask the questions, to find out all of this information. So do go and make the most of today. So a little bit about my story. I'm an environmental scientist, but I'm also a director of a global engineering firm called Arup. And a lot of people say, how did that happen, me included? So I want to talk to you a little bit today about how that happened. When I was 14, I actually wanted to be a sound engineer. I love music. I love the idea of pushing buttons. This over here is still a little bit of my dream, pushing all the buttons. I wanted to travel the world. And I'll be honest, at 14, I wanted to move to Dublin and to meet Larry Mullen Jr. You're all probably too young to know who he is. He's the drummer with U2, but he was my crush when I was 14. Now, my mum was not very impressed at my choice of career. She thought that I should be a pharmacist because I'd earn really good money and I could manage my own hours. My dad also not very impressed at the idea of me moving to Dublin to meet Larry Mullen Jr., but he asked me, what did I enjoy at school? Now, my dad is a headmaster, which was a little bit tricky growing up at school, and I never really appreciated that he actually knew what he was talking about at the time until later. But he was right, and he said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So that was really important for me in terms of trying to figure out, what do I love doing? So when he asked me the question again, I said I loved learning about the Incas in Machu Picchu. I loved learning about the Amazon jungle, and I loved learning things about hot springs in Iceland. But what I loved about all of those things is that they made me curious as to how on earth, this is a city in the sky in Machu Picchu in South America. How on earth did they manage to engineer and build that city that is quite literally in the clouds? How does the Amazon jungle regenerate itself, and how does it sustain so much life and biodiversity? And the key thing was, how on earth do you get steam and boiling water that erupts from frozen ponds in Iceland? So all of those things made me incredibly curious. They made me ask questions, and that's why I chose physics and maths in terms of my career. And I am one of those people. Now, my friends tell me this. It's never nice to be told that you're very annoying, but my friends often tell me that I'm one of those annoying people who loves their job. And I really, really do love my job, and I think it's important to make choices that help you enjoy your job. Now, I also have a slide. I don't think I've been to 40 countries, but my job has given me the opportunity to travel to an awful lot of places. For me, it's been fantastic. And I've got to say, some of the places I've been to, I've had the best fish tacos in Mexico. I had the most amazing calamari when I was in the Lebanon. The food that you get to experience along the way is an absolute bonus of this job as well. So what is my job? What is engineering and what is Arup? So engineering is about finding solutions and engineering a change. This is about things that we use. It's about how we travel. It's about how we build the buildings that we live in, about how we filter and clean the water that we drink, and about how we process our rubbish. I've never heard of a garbage engineer before, but that's definitely a good job. So that is very much about what engineering is. These things matter now more than ever because of climate change. Has anyone in the room ever heard of climate change before? Yes, fantastic. So climate change, we know, is about dealing with more severe weather patterns than we're used to. Why does this matter? So 2003 is the year that possibly some of you were born. In 2003, 70,000 people in Europe died from heat waves. Now, you can sometimes hear about global warming and you think that that's great. The map on the top is cities that are used to having 35 degrees of temperature for more than 3 months in a year. The map on the bottom is what that's going to look like in 2050. That has a huge impact. So my job as an environmental scientist is understanding these changes in temperature, mapping them out, and then working with city governments and working to try and engineer changes for how we can either stop the climate from warming or how do we adapt and stop those people dying. So you may or may not be able to read this, but this is, and somebody else mentioned, the climate is changing not because of any of you sat here in the room, definitely not if you're under 20. Those of us over 20, we've messed it up. We've created a world where the climate is changing, but we need every single one of you to help us try and fix it. So if you can read this is where we are in society today. It's pretty amazing that we've reached a point where the effort necessary to extract the oil from the ground, ship it to a refinery, turn it into plastic, shape it appropriately, take it to a store, buy it, and bring it back home. All of that is considered to be less effort than what it takes to just wash a spoon when you're done with it. This is the effort, this is the society that we've created where we're very, very dependent on plastic. So you'll have heard a lot about single-use plastic, trying to eradicate it. You may actually be involved in some campaigns yourselves. This is the world that we've created, where we're very reliant on plastic and we have huge landfills and huge rubbish heaps everywhere. This is what I just don't see why we do this, and I think that we can engineer a change to make that different. So at Arup, this is what we try to do. We try to engineer that change. Instead of having all of your waste going to a landfill site, we're designing waste treatment facilities to try and reuse and recycle a lot of that material. We're also making them look quite pretty so that they're in keeping with the environment. They're not the big, ugly plants that you might otherwise be used to seeing. Science and technology is what will make that change. The other thing that we do at Arup, and you've just heard a little bit about wind turbines and SSE, we also design energy, an energy generation plant. 800 million people living in cities are going to be impacted by climate change in the next couple of years. This is a power station. Every single one of you has got a phone in your hand. That phone was charged up overnight or this morning by electricity. Does anyone know where their electricity actually came from? Do any of you know if it came from wind turbines or renewable energy, or did it come from one of these power plants? What we want to try and do at Arup is to make sure that we're using cleaner, more renewable energy. And we want to make sure that all of that energy is generated in places that are not going to be affected by flooding and climate. And flooding is a major issue in terms of water. So can we survive without water? This is what made my interest in climate change particularly personal to me. When I understood 500,000 people already face severe water scarcity around the world, most people dealing with that are people who are already disadvantaged and already vulnerable. So it's elderly, it's people who are sick, people who are disabled, and it's often women. It's women who are much more likely to be disadvantaged by climate change. So I think, again, as women, we've got a real opportunity and a role to try and change that. But the good news is we're already doing quite a lot. It was a woman who first discovered the greenhouse effect. Now, you all know about climate change, so you all will know about the greenhouse effect. It was only in 2016 that it was actually revealed that it was a woman, Eunice Foote, who discovered what the greenhouse effect was. The credit for that had been taken by a man up until then. So we're doing a lot already, and we can do more. The Women for Climate Initiative, this is something that I'm involved in. If any of you have heard of the Paris Agreement, so back in 2015, 195 countries around the world came together and signed an agreement to say, we recognize climate change is happening and we want to make a difference. We want to try and take action to change it. The interesting thing was, after about 30 years of trying to do this, it happened in Paris in 2015. Does anybody know why it happened in Paris in 2015 and who was around the table to make that negotiation work? Women. 6 women were the main negotiators of that initiative. They included people, again, our own Mary Robinson was involved in that as well. So women are incredibly powerful. I love the statement from them. We are women, we are mayors, we're entrepreneurs, we're innovators. We are students and we are scientists. We are activists. We're the dreamers and we're the doers. And we are the makers of tomorrow. Now, you're going to probably hear that a lot today, that really you are shaping the world that we're going to live in. When we join our voices together, we are unstoppable. We're powerful, and we are Women for Climate. And there is a role and an opportunity for every single one of you to be part of that as well. Another individual, Gro Brundtland, who you may not have heard of, she was the Prime Minister of Norway, and she came up with the original definition of sustainability and really identified what climate change was about. I actually had an opportunity to meet her. I was in New York at a dinner a couple of years ago, and I have to admit, this is a horrible thing to have to admit, but I wasn't brave enough to go up and talk to her, even though the report that was being launched was one that I had written. I had put a team together and produced a report. I was at a party that was being launched. It was Bloomberg, if any of you know him. He happens to be a billionaire, so it was a very good party. I've been to several of his parties in Rio, in Johannesburg, and in New York. Again, not what I expected when I was learning about geology and rocks and water drainage systems at school, but that is where my job has taken me. The report was launched, and I wasn't brave enough to go up and speak to her. Larry Mullen Jr. aside, Gro Brundtland was probably my hero. So my advice to all of you today is to be brave. Be braver in your choices and be confident in yourselves in terms of what you do. I don't know if any of you have come across Greta before or seen the video of Greta speaking to the United Nations or to Davos. If you haven't, I would highly recommend you all go onto YouTube and have a look at what she has to say. Greta's a 13-year-old Swedish student who has really taken action on climate change. She wants to make a difference. She's essentially saying that adults keep saying, we owe it to the young people to give them hope. She does not want that hope. She wants us to panic. And I think she's right in terms of wanting us to panic. She wants us to feel the fear every day that she's feeling, and then she wants us to act. And I think this is the difference. We talk a lot about climate change. We talk a lot about what we'd like to do. We really need to stand up and make a decision and make that change. So she says she wants us to act as if our house is on fire. And when we look at some of the climate change that is happening, fires and heat waves are definitely one of the things that we need to be more aware of. I had colleagues in Australia in December, which is obviously summer in Australia, talking about bats falling from the sky because it was over 40 degrees. It was so incredibly hot. So there's definitely something that we can all do to make that change and engineer the difference. And I want to finish up. I talked earlier about not being brave and why that's, we really should get over that and be a lot braver. And I did take my own advice. One of the other things, I grew up singing a nursery rhyme about going to London to visit the Queen. Now, I never expected that I would actually go to London and have dinner with her husband. But it turns out that that's what I did a couple of years ago. I was at an engineering dinner and Prince Philip was the speaker. And because I regretted not going to speak to Gro Brundtland when I had the chance, I marched myself up to Prince Philip. If any of you have seen him recently, he had a little bit of a car crash. He's not the youngest in the room. But I went up, probably broke all royal protocol, and I went up and introduced myself to him, and I started speaking to him about Buckingham Palace, which is where he lives. And I happen to know that they have a really good energy efficient and renewable energy heating system at Buckingham Palace. So I spent about 10 or 15 minutes talking to Prince Philip all about his energy and heating system. And it reminded me that what I know, which again at the time is about boilers and district heating and renewable energy, It's important and it's valuable, and we need to all remember and recognize that what we know can contribute, no matter how big or how small you think it is. So I just want to end today with those 2 words of advice, is to be brave. If you're not sure you're being brave, be a lot braver, because we need every single one of you to come together and help us in terms of engineering the change to try and reduce the impact of climate change. Thank you.